Hey everybody, welcome back. I haven't done a movie review for a while, and this is I wanted to do a review on this movie. A lot of people haven't heard of it. I know a lot of people, even younger people, are big fans of obviously the Blues Brothers. A lot of people are great, big fans of John Belushi and Dan Akroyd. They were in a lot of movies together, and this is a movie they're both in together. And it's kind of weird because their roles are reversed. Usually Dan Akroyd is the more humble, you know, guy, and John Belushi is the more wild man. But in this movie, their roles are reversed. I'm not sure. Obviously, John Belushi was a big drug user, so I imagine he was a lot like what he was in the characters he played in a lot of his movies, like Animal House, for example. He was a big drinker in that movie. This movie was made in 1981. This was actually John Belushi's last movie. It was called Neighbors. It was released in December of 1981, just a few months before he died. This was John's last movie. He still made like guest appearances on TV, like on Saturday Night Live, and I'm sure he was on the Tonight Show or Today Show. But this was his last movie that he did. Ended up dying of heroin, cocaine overdose in March of 1982, just a few months after. Now, we'll get on record. This is like a dark comedy. It doesn't really, as a kid, I loved this movie as a kid. I saw this movie in 1986 for the first time when I was only 7 years old. My parents rented it from the local video store to see what it was about. And there's actually two other movies called Neighbors as well, but this is the one with, I think there was one with Seth Rogen, but this is the one with John Belushi and Dan Akroyd, made in 1981, so just to get that on record. I'm not sure how this, I was peeing my diapers and this movie came out, so I'm not sure how well it went over. A lot of people haven't heard of it. A lot of people aren't familiar with it, which is surprising because, John Belushi and Dan Akroyd, were so famous. I'm pretty sure that everybody would have seen it back in the day, but yeah, even a lot of older people haven't seen it, but I loved it as a kid, and it doesn't really, a lot of movies when you're a kid, they don't make sense, even if you like them or not, but then you get older, you get more of the jokes, you get more of the script, the dialogue, what they're talking about. But this movie, I will tell you, and it's not just me, it doesn't really make any sense. It really doesn't. It's a weird movie, but it definitely, to sum it up, there's just like one interesting event after another, and the music too. The music is a masterpiece. I don't know who did the music, but it's like each character, it's mainly just, it takes place just on a Friday night into a next day, a Saturday morning. It takes place in less than 24 hours, but the main characters is John Belushi and his wife, Catherine Walker, who's kind of like a no-name actress today. I couldn't find anything current on her. She was married to James Taylor for 10 years, from 1985 to 1995. Dan Akroyd, which you all know who he is, and then his wife, I forget what her name is in real life, but it's basically the four of them. Dan Akroyd is married to this Ramona character. I forget what her name is in real life, and then John Belushi is married to Enid, which is played by Catherine Walker, and it said, as an adult, it just still doesn't make sense, but it's just so twisted. I guess it's still, even though it makes sense, the twist of everything, the way each scene has like a whole new twist on it, and the music just kind of keeps you into it. The music is a masterpiece. Like I said, I don't know who did the music, but like each character has like different, like with Dan Akroyd, there's always like this sci-fi music, like this creepy sci-fi music playing every time he steals a scene. And when like his wife Ramona steals a scene, like they're playing sexy, like stripper, love music, things like that. And John Belushi, they're playing like upbeat, happy music. And his wife is really a bitch. So with her, when she steals the scenes, like they're playing like this real, music that sounds like the character's angry. It's so funny, so funny. Just that kind of thing keeps you into it. And just the kind of the punchlines every once in a while, the jokes that are cracked throughout the movie. I'm not, I'm going to go through some funny things, but it's like, I know some of it is going to be kind of a spoiler alert, but I'm not going to give away just about everything. But just the opening scene, it's like a Friday night, John Belushi and his wife, Enid, are like off of work, headed home to relax on a Friday night, and they live in a cul-de-sac, which is called, their house is I guess the house next door to them, which is number 1 Burt Street, and they're number 2 Burt Street. The house next to them has been deserted. I guess the neighbors both, I guess the husband died, and then the wife went into a nursing home, so it's like the property hasn't been kept for it. Almost looks like a haunted mansion in a way. Older home, and the yard is like the weeds are like 6 feet tall. And then John Belushi's house, it's like modern, early 80s house. Looks, yeah, he's like number 2 Bird Street. There's just 2 homes on this cul-de-sac, so spooky. And there's like a swamp with quicksand next to his home. And it's funny, like from the beginning, like things just don't make sense from the beginning. I don't know how much time it passed, but like John Belushi and his wife, they're sitting around watching TV, and they're getting hungry for dinner, and his wife is like, oh, I guess it's that time, and John Belushi's like, oh, do you need any help? And she's like, oh, no. She's like, there was a terrific recipe for capon in the Time magazine today. She's like, it only takes 2 minutes, which, yeah, you just have to throw that in the oven, season it good, throw it in the oven, but capon, depending on the size, it could take like, a couple hours to cook, so it's like, she's saying it takes 2 minutes, and then the next thing you know, she's like, all they have is frozen waffles. She's taking like a knife and like stabbing, like the waffles, you could tell she'd had them for a while. They're like freezer burned, and she's like knocking ice blocks off. And then she like looks, and John Belushi's like so pissed. And she's like, the wife is like, oh, how many frozen waffles do you want? He's like, waffles? Like, what happened to the capon? She's like, what capon? And he's like, oh, you told me you had an incredible recipe for it. She's like, oh, I did. I didn't say we're having it. It's like, my God, it's like, leave it to you to take something for granted. It's like, frozen waffles is all we got. And then he says something like, oh, I thought you were going to pick up steaks for tomorrow. And she's like, oh, God, now you're asking for steak? And he's like, well, you could have picked up some cheap ones. And she's like, oh, I will not eat cheap meat. And then, not too long after that, Dan Akroyd and his wife, Ramona, move in next door. And John Belushi's kind of like looking through the window with them, and he notices they have a dog. So he goes outside to, the dog's like playing around in his garden or his flower bed or something like that. And he is pissed about the dog. And then at one point, like he sees the dog running around the house. He goes outside for something. And then he's like hiding in the bushes trying to scare the dog away. And then he sees his wife Enid like throw a steak at the dog. And she's like, oh, here, boy, you want some steak? And he has this look in his face like, oh my God, why would you waste our steak like that? You told me all we had was frozen waffles. And so then he feeds like Dan Akroyd, and he says like, oh, what's on your menu, pal? I'm starved. And he's like, well, afraid I spoke too soon earlier. He's like, we don't really have enough food. Like, my wife didn't get to her shopping today. So then Dan Akroyd offers to go and get takeout. And he says like, oh, his brake, he can't drive to the restaurant because he's like, oh, my brakes are shot. And then, John Belushi's like, oh, well, why don't I just go get the food then? And Dan Akroyd's like, oh, no, come on, if you insist on paying for the food, which I think John Belushi didn't even want to pay for the food, because Dan Akroyd's like, hey, friend, he's like, I do the running, I know you want to spring for the tab, and he gives him like $30 or something like that, and he ends up saying like, oh, he's like, I'll get the keys to my car, or he's like, oh, how do I get to the restaurant? He's like, well, you can use my car, and he's like, well, do you actually have a key or just a rubber band you can wind up? And he gives him the keys. And ends up like Dan Akroyd doesn't go to this Italian. Well, first they talk about like what kind of food to get, and John Belushi's mentioning like all this real expensive food. He's go, oh, why don't you get some ravioli and some stuffed clams and some scampi with plenty of garlic. He's mentioning all this fancy food, and then the next thing you know, and John Belushi goes upstairs and he finds Ramona, Dan Akroyd's wife, in his bed and naked, and she's got the covers over her, and she's like, oh, hi. She's like, I took a bath. Movie always makes me kind of, she says something like, oh, I found a dead rat in your tub. Like, my husband said not to move it. And she's like, I took a pill. Movie always makes me kind of hyper. She's like, I hope you don't mind. And he's like, oh, sure, I don't mind. And she's like, oh, you do mind, don't you? And she like stands up and drops her towel, exposes everything. And he's like, Italian food is on the way. We've made arrangements. You just come down and join us whenever you can, okay? And then he's walking out the door, trying not to look at her, and she's like, oh, what are you so nervous about, Earl? That's his name in the movie, Earl. And she's like, are you afraid my husband would catch you up here screwing me? He walks out the door, and he's just like so relieved to walk out of there. And then you see Vic, who's played by Dan Akroyd. Vic is like going through John Belushi's office, looking through his checkbook or something like that. And he's like, hey, what are you doing up here, robbing me? He's like, oh, no. He's got a pencil in his hand. And he's like, oh, no, I just wanted to get a piece of paper, pencil, write down what we want for dinner. He's like, you got a pencil in your hand. And he's looking through his checkbook. He's like, oh, $332. Was that all he had at the end of last month? And he's like, oh, let's just go downstairs. And he's like, fine, after you. So what do you want? And then John Belushi, he totally changes the menu. He's like, no big deal. Just keep it simple, huh? Spaghetti, meatballs, a salad, and whatever you want for you. And next thing you know, Dan Akroyd's next door making like his own homemade spaghetti dinner. And then he comes over later with the food, pretends like it's from an Italian restaurant. And he says, oh, well, wonder if he had the spaghetti sauce for a while. You go, let's dig into this stuff before the sauce turns into penicillin. There's just so many funny scenes throughout the movie, like I said, Ramona and Vic's wife and Vic, Dan Akroyd and his wife Ramona, they're constantly wandering, disappearing. John Belushi leaves the room and then he comes back and they're gone and they're in a completely different room in the house. It almost seemed like they were both, John Belushi and his wife, they didn't get along real well. Their marriage definitely staled, and the fact that Ramona is throwing herself at John Belushi almost sounds like their marriage was kind of stale too, her and Dan Akroyd. And, she made Ramona, it's funny, there's some quotes that, it's like they don't make sense, but yet they're still funny. It's like, what? That doesn't make any sense at all, but it's still funny. There's one point the next day when Vic was talking about leaving Ramona, John Belushi said something like, oh, are you going to miss your husband, Vic? And she's like, oh, Vic. She's like, I don't know. She's like, he was really terrific in bed until I got in it. It's like, it's funny, but like it doesn't make any sense. And there was a scene with a coffee cup where later on that Friday night, early Saturday morning, where John Belushi, I guess his daughter, it was away at college, and she got kicked out of school, I guess, for stealing a ring. And Dan Akroyd is making like nothing out of it. And he says something like, oh, is that all? And John Belushi's like, well, she's been expelled, for God's sake. And this whole coffee scene, Dan Akroyd offers to fix coffee, but Dan Akroyd has like a brand new coffee cup, and he gives us one nasty looking, dirty coffee cup to John Belushi. It's like so dirty, and Dan Akroyd, John Belushi keeps switching the coffee cups back. Dan Akroyd keeps switching them. So at one point, and it's like coffee's really expensive. At one point, like John Belushi's like pouring the coffee into his hand. And he's like, you're going to waste that coffee? And John Belushi's like, no, I'll just put it someplace else till I wash up the cup. And he's like, I'll sit down and put that coffee powder back in the cup. It's like instant Folgers coffee. And he's like, oh, can I? And then he's got the stained, he's got like the coffee grounds on his hands. And he's like, oh, can I wash my hands? Dan Akroyd's like, no, I thought you came over here to talk. And then John Belushi's just like, going like this with his hands, and he's keeps the dirty coffee cup. Yeah, because he said something like, oh, Dan Akroyd has like a gun, a shotgun or something like that. And he's like, oh, just take back that cup and keep switching, or it'll be Pump City. So then John Belushi's like, oh, it makes no difference to me. And he just keeps the dirty coffee cup, but he's not drinking it at all. And then Dan Akroyd said something like, oh, about you, because he wanted to talk about John Belushi's daughter getting kicked out of college. And Dan Akroyd's like, well, it's funny. He says something like, oh, he's like, you got a real problem there with your daughter. He's like, what are you talking about? What do you mean? And he said, drugs, I can tell, that spaced out look. He's like, I used to see it all the time when I was working. He said something like, oh, working at a police station, they would bring like drug users in. And he's like, oh, she's never taken drugs in her life. Never. And he's like, well, I'm sorry. It was just a wild guess, And then he says something like, oh, I can think of a problem that's a great deal more important, and you, a parent, are ignoring it completely. And John Belushi's like, what? And he's like, what is your daughter doing about sex? Is she getting probed? And John Belushi just flips and tosses his hot coffee at him. And Dan Akroyd ducks, and then they both get pissed at each other and kick each other in the balls. And they're like, oh, they're screaming. And it's just so funny, like that term probed. Like I didn't know what that meant when I was a kid. I didn't know what that, finally I found out what that meant when I was a teenager. But it's so funny, just probe, like I've heard screwed, fucked, shagged, there's all these terms we've heard for sex, banged, but I've never heard probe before. It was so funny, so funny. And then like at one point, John Belushi's daughter had come home from college with edible panties. They look like they're fruit roll-ups, different flavors. And his daughter, like, said something like, "Oh, they come in 4 flavors," and then Dan Aykroyd's making a joke. He's like, "Hey, Earl, you want some of your daughter's panties?" He's like, "They come in 4 flavors, like banana, peach, mint." He's like, "Yeah, of course, cherry," trying to insinuate that his daughter's a virgin, and John Belushi punches him out. This is something else. At one point towards the end of the movie, John Belushi just turns over his car to Dan Akroyd. It's so funny, and he made who the hell gets a hard on about car motor oil? But he's like, "Oh, Vic," he's like, "I almost forgot to tell you." He's like so dramatic about the oil change, and he's like, "Oh, this car will need an oil change about 1,000 miles," and he's like, "Make sure you use such and such an oil." He's like, "It'll never let you down." He's like, "Check the information on the door panel." And then at one point, they had like no food in the house the next day. And Ramona, she's like trying to put the make on John Belushi. She's like, "Hey, if you have hot water and ketchup, I can make us some great tomato soup." I guess actually people actually did that during the Depression, and they mixed hot water and ketchup, and they pretended it was real tomato soup. And it was at one point where Dan Akroyd burned the house down, like crashed like a airplane into the house, like one of those little airplanes that you could fly with a remote. And he crashed his plane in the house, burned it down. And it's funny, like Dan Akroyd and his wife Ramona were talking about living with them, but he says like, "Oh, if we do live with you, we'll need the big room facing the road." And John Belushi's like, "Oh, the master bedroom," and like, "Hey, we'll earn our keep around here." And he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I just have a sentimental attachment to it." He's like, "Oh, I'll tell you what," he's like, "with some deep cleaning and some basic carpentry, I can make you a place to live in the garage." And just like that, Dan Aykroyd's like, "Oh, the garage, huh?" He's like, "All right." And he tells his wife, like, "Come on, let's hit the road," and they take off. And I think John Belushi like just turns over. Oh yeah, I mentioned that already. He turns over his car to them, and John Belushi and his wife, they don't have 2 cars. They just have like 1 car. So it's like, how the hell are they going to get around now? And when Dan Aykroyd burned the house down, the fire department shows up, and there's like a fire marshal with a hose, and there's like he's standing like probably like 100 yards away from the house, not doing anything really. The water's just like trickling out of the hose, like not even. It's like a little garden hose. I mean, it's a fire hose, but the water's just kind of trickling out like it would in a garden hose, like without any pressure at all. And John Belushi's like, "Whoa, what's with the water?" He's like, "Oh, no pressure, can't you see?" He's like, "Well, what can we do about it?" And then one of the other fighters says something like, "Oh, I know what we can do." He's like, "Let's get some marshmallows, have a marshmallow campfire." And then Dan Aykroyd, or John Belushi, ends up deciding he wants to leave his wife, and he decides he wants to run off with Dan Aykroyd and his wife Ramona. So like, "Oh yeah, let's go," because they said like, "Oh, it's just not gonna." Dan Aykroyd's like, "Oh, we were thinking about it, we took off, but it's not gonna be the same without you." So he just decides to leave his wife, his daughter, his suburban life behind. And then he's like, "Oh, let's go." And then Dan Aykroyd's like, well, not so fast, pal. Wait a minute, not so fast, pal. He's like, don't you think you should leave a note to your wife?" He's like, "Yeah, you're right." And he's like, "In fact, I think I leave a little more than just a note." And he ends up burning the house down. And as they're driving off, the house goes up in flames. And it's funny, this line, and Dan Aykroyd says something like, "Oh man, you weren't kidding. You are leaving a little more than just a note." And then the last line of the movie, John Belushi says, "Oh yeah, well, anyways, my wife never really did like living in a dark house to begin with." And they all just crack up, bust out laughing, and that was the end of the movie. So yeah, if you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend checking it out. You got to see it at least once. I will admit, it doesn't make any sense. Even as a 40-year-old, I've trying to figure it out, but it still doesn't make any sense. And Mom's like, "Oh, you're not really supposed to think too hard about that movie. I guess you're just supposed to enjoy it." So yeah, definitely check that movie out. I don't think you'll be disappointed. That's all I have to say in that movie. And comment, like, share, subscribe. And I'll talk to you all real soon with another interesting video. Have a great weekend, everybody. Bye.